Well, this has been a long time coming, hasn't it? After watching Netflix's Witcher adaptation over a year ago and laughing uncontrollably, whether out of grief, horror, or most commonly pure, utter disbelief, I grew certain that soon a legion of YouTube reviewers and media critics would dissect this abomination of an adaptation with surgical precision. So I waited. And waited. And after a year, no significant in-depth reviews have come out, at least none that I am aware of or watch. And so eventually, like every proper villain, I was left to conclude that the best way to go about this would be...
I'll do it myself.
Hello, as you can see, I have rebranded since my last ancient upload to YouTube after re-evaluating what I wanted to achieve out of this channel. Originally intent on becoming a Witcher lore channel, primarily, and promoting myself accordingly, I have since expanded my horizons considerably when it comes to popular pieces of fiction, fantasy in particular, and have therefore opted to completely rebrand. So greetings everyone to the first and hopefully many future Veles Talks, the channel where I dig into and explore my favorite fantasy series as well as other occasional pieces of fiction and media, writing and stories in general. However, since I did originally begin with The Witcher, and it remains a very important series for me on a personal level, I feel like I owe it to myself and any people who might have watched my first few videos to finally review the unholy spawn of Netflix that was the first season of The Witcher. This is the first part of an 8 or possibly 9-part series where I dissect scene by scene, frame by frame if necessary, just why The Witcher bombs as an adaptation and is nothing to be proud of as a standalone product either. To demonstrate why this is the case, I will be drawing heavily from the books and spoiling things from them, only some of which will have been released by the time the videos are originally uploaded. Therefore, if you haven't read the books yourself and intend to do so, something I still heartily recommend, I will be leaving spoiler sections of the video tagged in the description, should there be any, so that you can comfortably skip over the spoilers. I will, however, be trying to do my best to demonstrate my point by demonstrating the inadequacies within the show itself, which sadly has thus far proven far simpler than even I expected. I will do my best to cover the scenes objectively and fairly, but I have to stress that I am a dedicated fan of the original books and believe them to be in every way superior after having watched the series, so at times I might end up being biased. Whenever I'll be aware of such, I will be sure to let you know. The problem is with my personal preference specifically. If all goes well and the series goes smoothly, I plan to dissect each video with the precision of Ryan's karma, and possibly conclude with a general autopsy report of what worked, what didn't, and what was downright insulting. Either way, without further ado, sit back, relax,
And here we go.
The first season of The Witcher Netflix adaptation tries to adapt several of the short stories from the two initial anthologies which formally kicked off Andrzej Sapkowski's Witcher series back in 1993. I say tries, but I often can't really tell whether any effort was put into trying to keep things consistent, believable, or even entertaining. For those who don't know, the series started with the short story aptly titled The Witcher, which Sapkowski penned for a writing competition hosted by a Polish magazine, and had no intentions of expanding into a greater series until he was made aware of its success with the readers. He proceeded to write a slew of other short stories and one-off adventures, which were then rolled up into two anthologies, before setting his protagonist, the Witcher, Geralt of Rivia, into a grander story, as well as making him the deuteragonist alongside Ciri, his child of destiny. Now, Sapkowski is a man who likes to keep all his doors open, and so he began planting the seeds for a bigger story before it began. In fact, several of the short stories are dedicated explicitly to setting up elements of the greater story, and most of what is presented within the short stories makes a return in the main series to one degree or another. However, even he himself may not have been sure whether anything would come of them, and so all of the stories are self-contained, and there's a point to them even if you don't plan on reading more than one. Sounds like a dream come true for a short episodic TV series, right?
Wrong!
Apparently not. Now, here's the first time we take a dive into studio speculations, and to be clear, I have no idea what went on behind the scenes of the Witcher production team, so anything I say about the matter you can feel free to take as speculation. Informed, weighted speculation, but speculation nevertheless. However, anyone and everyone I have ever seen review the show brought up the exact same thing. The timelines, the unholy, poorly distinguished, poorly edited timelines, which render the show from poorly written to just poorly executed in general. Why ever did the timelines come into play, you ask? Well, to answer your question, which other show came to an end in 2019? Which masterpiece of the small screen turned masterpiece of the burning screen came to a crashing, calamitous end earlier that year, an end no one could have foreseen at the time The Witcher was still in production? Yes, Game of Thrones was ending. The search for a new fantasy show to carry its legacy was intense, especially since the showrunners
Kind of forgot
to give a meaningful, memorable ending to anyone. I am fairly certain that the timing of the Witcher series was at least partially set to deliberately fill the inevitable void left in its wake. Say what you will, pre-Season 8 Thrones was still dominant on television, even if steadily dropping in quality years before. Now, many people have put forward the claim that The Witcher had the best shot of taking its place once it was over. After all, it's a gritty, dirty fantasy series with plenty of magic, politics, battles, and other entertainment, but allow me to stress this at the start. The Witcher is not Game of Thrones, or A Song of Ice and Fire for that matter. There are many reasons, but ultimately the main difference is that The Witcher is a much smaller, slower, character-driven story. George R. R. Martin deliberately treats his characters as disposable, something D&D
kind of forgot
towards the end, and the plot of his story runs on large, multi-layered events which even the main characters often only affect in minor ways, and frequently merely bear witness to. The Witcher, on the other hand, is a character drama, with the world and systems around it as little more than a stage for the actors to play their part. Its world is far shallower and more cliché, its politics much more simplified, and its magic makes very little sense once you think about it for a little while, and is used to solve problems on far fewer occasions than it could or should be. The main pull of the series, therefore, is the character drama and character development, as well as the wonderful sense of adventure and exploration Sapkowski is good at conveying. If anything, the series is more similar to the Dunk and Egg short stories, also penned by George R. R. Martin, which are also very character-driven and also comparatively light-hearted, except for that one time a man's brain fall out of his skull after he removes his helmet, but we don't talk about tragedy here. Of course, The Witcher is also perfectly capable of depicting grand, world-changing events, but Geralt himself is rarely directly participating in them, and they only come into play much later in the series. But then, of course, that would mean that we would have to plant our seeds before we reap the fruit, and who wants to do that, am I right? Naturally, it would be far better to hook people with the promise of grand battles and wars and political intrigue from the first few episodes, no matter how little sense it makes or how goofy it may look with our limited budget. Ah, yes, a flawless strategy. Will this force us to chop up the timeline into chunky salsa? Of course. Do we care? Apparently not. In fact, we won't even bother with announcing the transitions between eras, for example by using lighting, visibly aging up certain characters, or even just flat out telling the audience what year it is. It's not like The Witcher has a timeline. No. Will the audience be confused as a chameleon looking into a mirror? Probably, but what do we care? Netflix doesn't run based on audience reviews, everyone knows that. The important thing is, big battles, feudal politics, social commentary equals Game of Thrones, equals more views and prestige, right? The point of all this is to say, the producers tried to have their cake and eat it too. They tried to immediately hook the audience with the promise of a grand, world-changing epic, and with the simple, character-driven adventures that got the Witcher books where they are today to begin with. Because make no mistake, the adventure aspect of the story doesn't go anywhere. The books merely broaden to include more characters and points of view, but Geralt remains essentially a questing adventurer throughout all of the novels. And like a monkey trying to pry all the candy from the jar at once, the producers end up with nothing to show for it in the end, butchering both the short stories and the later source material by not giving either timeline the proper room to breathe. The Fall of Sintra, one of the most horrific and devastating events within the story, is portrayed without any context in a short span of time, without us even knowing any of the characters, let alone being invested in them. Thus it rings completely hollow, and is sadly only a taste of what is to come.
Who is Yennefer?
God, I loathe the ending. So now, with that out of the way, Today we'll be looking at episode 1 specifically, which claims to adapt the fan-favorite short story The Lesser Evil, and depicts events which in the books happen largely off-screen, mainly the Fall of Sintra. I will be looking at these scenes in chronological order and describe why they do or don't work, as well as how they stand compared to their book counterparts, which usually is rather poorly. The opening depicts Geralt fighting a Kikimora, and is easily the most faithful part of the episode, which is rather unfortunate, since in the books the fight happens off-screen, and Geralt only arrives in Blaviken with the Kikimora's corpse. By the way, this is not at all what a Kikimora is meant to be in actual Slavic folklore, but that is perhaps the only thing the books, the games, and the series remain consistent at, giving the various monsters wildly inappropriate names compared to their inspiration. Anyway, we see Geralt struggle a bit, and the monster give him the good old struggle until the hero can fight back, tussle, but it's not a bad opener, and sets up what Geralt does effectively. As a side note, I am not at all a fan of the dark, Snyder-esque lighting that is splattered across the show. It gives it a forcefully grim and artificial atmosphere, whereas the books and the games relied on painting their world with pretty colors to make it feel more alive and compensate for its lack of depth, and often to contrast with the deeply disturbing and horrifying events. Regardless, the second scene is when I began to suspect that we were in for a ride as far as adaptations are concerned. Geralt rides into Blaviken and is immediately treated with hostility from the locals, to demonstrate the prejudice witchers and mutants in general face in the world. In other words, it's lifting a scene from the very first Witcher story and combining it with a later scene from The Lesser Evil, which is used to demonstrate the same fact, and placing it here. Which is all fine and good, right? Well, we'll get to that later. All I'll say for now is that in the books, Geralt goes straight to the alderman of Blaviken, who is a personal friend of his, and even lends him a room for free during his stay. We are given the impression that Geralt has had a long history with helping out around Blaviken from time to time. It's easy to forget considering how long Witchers live, but by the time the stories start, Geralt is estimated to already be between 60 or 70 years old, and has made for himself quite a reputation, as well as having a great amount of friends and associates all across the world. Anyway, in this version of events, Geralt asks to see the alderman and is instead antagonized by a bunch of morons who, for some bizarre reason, are intent on finding out what a witcher is capable of doing. Until, that is, they are told off by the first character to be chucked into the meat grinder within this abortion of a series, Renfri. Now, Geralt actually meets Renfri later into the story, and he searches her out at that point, which is the reason why he is antagonized by her goons in the first place. Here, Renfri herself takes an interest in Geralt, for some reason. Why? Who can say? Based on the long, silent looks they're trading, I suppose we're meant to infer she took a liking to him. Which leads me neatly to discuss how Renfri is a very diluted version of herself within the show. In the books, Renfri's backstory is pretty much the same, although expanded greatly. Stregobor spends several pages detailing her backstory, and the show cuts down on the exposition, but along with the details, cuts out some fairly important pieces of trivia. Most notably, that Renfri has by this point in time earned herself the charming nickname Shrike. Why Shrike? Because much like a shrike, she would impale her prey, that is, travelers she and her gang robbed and murdered, on long wooden spikes along the road. The part about her organizing a coup in a small unnamed kingdom, which wiped out the entire royal family and probably caused the kingdom to collapse, is also left on the cutting floor. As is her run-in with 7 gnomes who took her in, yet all of whom ended up killing each other while only she made it out alive. You begin to see a pattern emerging, right? Namely, that Renfri in the books is a cold, conniving psychopath and an open sadist who subscribes to a dog-eat-dog worldview and is not ashamed of the violent lifestyle she leads. This is also something Geralt correctly picks up on immediately after meeting her, and what he identifies as the thing that allows her to command a pack of larger, stronger men with an iron grip. She commands instant respect and fear within her subordinates, and has that kind of eerie, predatory smile which dares you to challenge her authority. Now, compare what I just described with this.
I apologize for my man's interference in your day.
Or this.
My men, they love me and I love them. But it's been a long time since someone saw me.
Or this. What the hell are you standing there allowing him to size you up? You didn't take shit from the alderman himself when he tried to threaten you in canon. Combined with many of her greater crimes not even being brought up, neither by Stregobor nor by Renfri, you can probably see where I'm going with this. Namely, that Renfri has been quite thoroughly whitewashed by the adaptation. Why? I have my theories, but mostly I think they try to make her more straightforward sympathetic and less of a complicated character. For now, she acts as the local friendly face for Geralt and takes on much of the alderman's dialogue with him. Concerning the dialogue, I will say quite a bit has been lifted directly from the books, which is an indisputably good thing, seeing as that which has not been is all too often cancelled.
What happened with you, you motherfucker goat?
I am Torque, the Sylvan, a rare and intelligent creature!
You're a dick. With balls.
Shut the fuck up. Still, a lot of what has been lifted word for word often rings hollow, either due to the delivery or the change of context behind it. I get that they had to reshuffle a lot because of the changes to the story while wanting to deliver the information necessary for the audience to understand, but that is a bed entirely of their own making. We are then introduced to the alderman's replacement in this story, Marilka, who is actually his canon daughter, but in the books is little more than a named background character. Why was this change made? Who can say, seeing as the character actually takes away from the overall plotline? We're going to come back to that later. Because she doesn't know Geralt, nor does she know anything about Geralt, which makes her just another random kid he met in town, not, as these dimwits later claim,
Your little friend.
Either way, she tells Geralt pretty much the same as what the alderman did in the books, namely that there is no reward for the Kikimora, and then adds this bit of exposition.
Kikimoras are useful. Population control.
Okay, so we're starting to stuff the world building into the woodchipper as well. Lovely, just let me get my gloves. In the books, a similar line is uttered in another story, featuring Geralt being hired to kill a Zugel, another variety of swamp monster. Pretty similar, right? Except in that story, Geralt was staying in a large overpopulated city, not in a small town in the middle of nowhere like Blaviken. I mean, how overpopulated can you be if your town square is the size of a wide street? Not to mention in the books, this phrase is uttered by a decidedly slimy town official, not by a kid we're supposed to ostensibly like and want to survive when this happens.
I will kill her.
Yeah, I don't care, Renfri. Add her to the overpopulation countermeasures. This might seem like a nitpick, and it somewhat is, but as we tear through this adaptation, I hope to prove on similar examples one of its greatest flaws, that it only pays lip service to the source material. Oh look, this cool thing from the books is now on screen. Does it make sense? Is it placed appropriately? Does it mean anything? Who cares? We get a line from the books. That's all that matters, right? Anyway, Marilka suggests Geralt try and cash in on the monster by selling it to the local sorcerer, while delivering a bunch of other choice dialogue with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer.
I think that makes you a hero. When Mother says you're the offspring of foul sorcery, a diabolic creation, filthy degenerate born of hell.
Oh, worry not. I am saving a proper autopsy of the fucking exposition for the second episode, but take this as your appetizer. No one talks like this.
Because my mother's never left Blaviken, and if it's good enough for Libushi, then it's good enough for Marilka. That's my name, like milk.
We take over a minute to learn everything there is about Marilka, who spills all of it out completely unprompted, and none of it matters. All of it is just used to prime the audience on what witchers are and how they are perceived, something the audience has already gathered from the opening and the scene in the inn. You don't need this. In summary, show don't tell is as foreign a concept to this show as casting Slavic actors, and this is sadly not even the most egregious example.
You know, the elves called this Dol Blathana before bequeathing it to the humans and retreating into their golden palaces in the mountains. There I go again, just delivering exposition.
What is this? We then get Geralt meeting Stregobor, which again plays out on the surface level similar to the books, except they immediately fuck it up by simply letting Geralt in through the magical barrier. In the books, Geralt does not need to spell out Stregobor is in hiding, because Stregobor barely allows the townsfolk to speak with him, let alone enter the tower, and he only lets Geralt in after some negotiations because he thinks he can use him. But Veles, you may argue, he probably just recognized Geralt and let him in without issues to cut down on the runtime, correct? Well, you might have been had Stregobor and Geralt known each other, like they do in the books. In fact, Stregobor only lets Geralt in after confirming his identity. Here, he just let in, willy-nilly, the first person to try and sell him some monster junk, without even confirming they work for Renfri, especially since he already met Renfri in this version of events. Aside from neutering his intelligence, Stregobor and the actor who plays him, Lars Mikkelsen, is easily one of the better aspects of the episodes. He sells the haughty, conceited bearing of Stregobor and most other wizards well enough, and the dialogue, although cut drastically when it comes to Renfri herself, touches upon most of the major plot points crucial for the story, and is delivered engagingly enough. Geralt's famous speech about lesser evil has me kind of conflicted. On the one hand, the delivery seems a bit too theatrical, like Geralt has been preparing it for a long time and is really eager to tell someone off using it, but then again, it's also delivered well enough that I can't really pin anything specific to complain about. On that topic, my opinion of Henry Cavill as Geralt is generally fairly positive actually, albeit he was not my first choice to play him, and I still feel like some of his deliveries are kind of tongue-in-cheek, like you can see how much he enjoys doing it, but honestly I'd much prefer that to some of the other lines within the series.
You are an abomination! I will destroy you!
He also definitely understands the character from what few lines of dialogue he is allowed to have, which is something best left for another episode's review. Overall, Cavill is easily one of the more enjoyable aspects of the series, though that is admittedly a very low bar to top. And so, with the premise of our episode handily set, it's time to skip years into the future, not that you'd know, to establish the second premise of our episode. The scenes which take place in Sintra are almost entirely show original, and it shows. However, the first few scenes we have are not terrible. We are introduced to Ciri posing as a street urchin, playing dice, and showing a bit more of her tomboyish side. To get this out of the way, I won't be commenting on how good of a match Freya Allan is for Ciri, because despite the amount of screen time dedicated to her, Ciri actually doesn't do much of anything throughout the first season, and Allan doesn't get to stretch her acting muscles much at all. For now, she does what little she is given well, and she both looks and sounds the part, albeit significantly aged up, which I will say, accounting for some later events, was a rare good idea on the show's behalf.
Good job.
The scene then introduces Queen Calanthe of Sintra and her husband, Iced Twirsa. Calanthe is a complicated issue, best saved for a later episode, but her character, to put it bluntly, is a hit or miss for me in this series. Some of her scenes seem really appropriate and in line with her book counterpart, while in others she just comes across like an incompetent tryhard.
My queen!
That's your own man, you bint. Don't lash out like a spurned ferret. We also have Iced, who barely appears in the books, and so I have nothing to compare his character to, but he acts a lot more carefree and jovial than you would expect from a Skelligan warlord, not to mention he looks absolutely nothing like one. Well, the Skelligans are never described in the books with the same level of care as they are in the games. They have a clear Celtic and Nordic tribal theme going on, something you would be unable to guess from both Iced's and later Ermien's appearance and disposition. In the next scene we get a bit more characterization for all three new characters, but it mostly serves to just deliver new information to the audience, as well as presenting Calanthe as significantly dumber than she is in the books. Now, we don't know exactly what reaction Calanthe first had to Nilfgaard massing its forces at her border, but based on her every appearance within the books, denial would not have been her go-to answer.
We will not fall because we are not under attack.
Yeah, no Polish man would ever write that. Regardless, in the scene, we find out war is coming, and we have precisely zero investment or context for it. Good stuff, but hey, at least the battle might be quite a spectacle, right? Right?
This ship's on Skellig! There's been a storm, your majesty! No one's coming!
Fuck.
Upon my first watch of the show, it was in this scene that I definitely knew I was in trouble. The previous problems were only nitpicks in comparison, and many would not even be issues in and of themselves had they not been compounded by later flaws. Here, however, is the first scene where those flaws come crashing down to rob the scene of meaning. Geralt is out in the woods for some reason, I don't know, inns are expensive I guess, and Renfri comes looking for him, guessing Marilka took him to see Stregobor. Why she would risk willingly approaching someone who might have been hired to kill her, I don't know, but at least him leaving town gives her a plausible enough excuse. She then proceeds to, completely unprompted, splurge her backstory all over Geralt, and it rings absolutely goddamn hollow. She also gives us this excellent line,
Lilith help me, I will take down anyone in my way.
which does wonders to remove the moral ambiguity of her state as a Lilith-worshipping princess of darkness, and utterly undermines the part of her dialogue where she insists she doesn't know whether she is a monster herself. She also flatly says she will
Take down anyone in my way.
But what the fuck does the market have to do with Stregobor's tower? We're coming back to that later. Geralt tells her that if she does what she plans to do, she'll prove to everyone that she's a monster. And for some reason, that weighs heavily on the mass-murdering highwaywoman, enough to leave her speechless even. Geralt then turns around, unconcerned about her very open threat of killing
Anyone in my way.
and walks away.
Wunderbar!
So, what's the damage? Well, in the books, Geralt goes to assess Renfri first, since he hasn't yet met her, and this is the point where he is, very specifically, antagonized by her men due to coming there looking for her. I repeat, only Renfri's bandits take an issue with Geralt in Blaviken. This is important. Renfri then arrives to silence them, has a threatening exchange with the alderman, but brandishes a letter from the local ruler, proving she has a right to be in town. Geralt then tries to talk to her, but she dismisses him with the promise that they'll talk later. Geralt stays in the alderman's attic for the night, when Renfri comes crawling in through the window and they have their chat. Unlike the show version, which practically begs Geralt for sympathy and for some reason cares deeply for his opinion, book Renfri begins the conversation like a negotiation, maintaining that she will kill Stregobor, and should the town militia try and stop her, she and her men can and will overpower them. Geralt counters that in such a case he would have to stand with the townsfolk, and Renfri then mentions that there are two people who could prevent bloodshed from breaking out, Geralt and Stregobor. Either Stregobor surrenders himself, something Geralt considers extremely unlikely, or Geralt returns to his tower and kills him on her behalf. Geralt counters that Renfri is another person who could prevent a bloodbath from occurring if she decides to let go of her grudge against Stregobor, who is no longer in a position to harm her. All will be settled peacefully. At this, Renfri laughs, and only then does she proceed to recount all the terrible, disturbing things that she's been forced to live through because of Stregobor's meddling. It might seem like a small change, but having a character blurt stuff out to garner sympathy points with a stranger, instead of coldly recounting all the horrible shit they went through to hammer home a point, well, I'll let you decide which is more poignant. Likewise, when Renfri proposes that Geralt would be showing Stregobor a mercy by killing him quickly, seeing as she has a lot worse prepared for him, Geralt only then brings up her alleged monstrosity. Again, a lot more organic and poignant way than just reciting lines from the text where they might approximately fit. Most importantly, however, never during the dialogue does Renfri threaten ordinary Blaviken townsfolk, nor is Geralt casual towards her threats of killing the guards. Instead, she mentions that Stregobor may in fact choose to present himself willingly should she present him with the try them ultimatum. Geralt, unfamiliar with the expression, doesn't catch on immediately, but this single line of dialogue leads directly towards the story's resolution. The ending of the scene is depicted later in the episode as their talk is split in two, but it sure as hell doesn't end with Geralt walking off while the psychopath behind him is only being stopped from slaughtering innocents because of his disapproval of such actions. Even by the end of their talk, Geralt coming to the town's defense is still an issue Renfri has to contend with. In the show, there is precisely no reason why she wouldn't allow Geralt to leave then and there, as he has already responded casually to her threat of slaughtering civilians. It undermines both of the participating characters for no real reason, and the worst is sadly yet to come, at least for Geralt. You know, I don't require my fantasy battlefields to look like historical reenactments, although I do welcome whenever someone puts in at least a moderate amount of effort. I do, however, require my fantasy battlefields to not insult my intelligence by once again serving as nothing but two massive armies slamming into each other in a hilarious chaos. I mean, seriously, what are all the battle scenes in this series? I could probably spend an hour dissecting all the things wrong with these few shots, but I won't, because they don't deserve it, so here's the SparkNotes version.
As you know, this is a highly complex case. Let me see here.
Where the fuck are your scouts? How could you have missed the entire massive Nilfgaardian vanguard, parked just one hill away from your position? Why are you not deploying your troops into battle formation immediately after seeing the enemy charge you? You have the advantage here, you planks. Why by the gods is your cavalry not on your flanks? Especially since Nilfgaard doesn't appear to have any cavalry of their own. Why would you copy Season 8 of all Game of Thrones seasons? Is horse suicide popular? Wow, gee, it's good to see literally no one thought to grab a spear in this mostly infantry-based melee. Kaladin is convulsing with despair somewhere out there. That armor is also doing you a fat load of good, isn't it? Has all the toughness of a jelly bear every time a blade tickles it. No archers either, and certainly no crossbows. That would be a war crime. Calante, are you high? Why are you charging headfirst into an enemy blob without even bodyguards? Do you want to get yourself killed?
This shit's from Sanity! There's been a storm, Your Majesty! No one's coming!
Wait, you're telling her now? A bit late, don't you think?
We're losing!
There's a big surprise!
Serves you right for not wearing your goddamn helmet, honestly. After picking off Iced, and only Iced, with his ridiculously good aim, we are introduced to perhaps the most bastardized character within the series. Cahir Maur Difrin Ep Cialach. Try pronouncing that 10 times in a row. I'll get to Cahir's character assassination later, but for now, it's awfully convenient he doesn't use that extremely good aim of his to, oh, I don't know, pick off the more important monarch, or just snipe soldiers from afar, or do literally anything besides the one thing the plot fairy told him to do. She's right there! Do something, you moron! This battle is not shown in the books, which is probably for the best. It'd only make the comparisons all that much more painful. In summary, the battles in this series are laughable, and that's not even mentioning the arms and equipment of the soldiers. It's all superficial meat grinding, garbage, and gore. Ooh, boy, am I going to have a field day when we arrive at the Battle of Sodden Bridge later on. For now, back to Sintra. We see Ciri finding out Calanthe is back and mortally wounded. She appears to have missed the commotion associated with an army's retreat, but I guess she overslept. Despite the fact that Ermion is present in this version of events, when not having any magic users was a key weakness of Sintra's in the books, he does not even attempt to heal Calanthe's injuries. Why? Pfft, I don't know. Guess he's just not that good with healing magic in this version of events, despite, being a druid whose specialty is life and growth magic. Don't think about it too much. Besides, he doesn't even look like a druid, so it's fine. Ciri and Calanthe then have a sad exchange where Calanthe tells her to be strong, and we see Nilfgaard's troops immediately flooding the city, despite arriving entirely on foot and having no siege weaponry whatsoever. Are Sintra's gates made of tissue paper? I should probably stop thinking about battle tactics so much, shouldn't I? Anyway, in the books, Sintra, being one of the oldest cities on the continent, has enchanted gates, which are impervious to physical damage, and Nilfgaard has to bring in their own sorcerers to destroy its wards before it can think of battering them down. To compensate, in this version of events, Ermion creates a magic barrier, which he has to maintain manually. It's a good thing none of the thousands of enemy soldiers spot the mage blocking their way and bring in their sniper elite to remove the obstacle. It's an even better thing that none of Sintra's remaining defenders think to, at least harass Nilfgaard while they are bottlenecked in front of their inner walls. But hey, at least we get to see Nilfgaard's own mages in action, right? A battle of wizards may be even cooler than watching squads of warrior mages systematically tear down entire fortifications. So maybe, just maybe, this will be an improvement. I'm sure that... fire arrows. Yeah, flaming arrows. I'm not even going to comment on the utility, or rather lack thereof, of flaming arrows, or just how stupid and underwhelming such a tactic is. Honestly, Netflix, the one time you inadvertently created an opportunity for a better scene to be made,
You blew it! You had it all and you blew it!
and that's not even mentioning when we get to actually see Nilfgaard's mages later on. Lord fucking help me. Then we get to easily the most slaughtered scene in the first episode, where my first of many disbelief quits occurred, where I had to pause the video to laugh in sheer confusion and disbelief.
Wanna hear about my first monster?
So, Geralt is camping out in the woods and completely at random starts telling Roach of all characters, the story of his first monster. Look, I would have appreciated making Roach more of a character, but this is pretty much the only time Geralt talks to her, just because the scriptwriter could not think of an organic way to add the monologue into the story. Maybe he could start talking about monsters when discussing them with, oh I don't know, someone else who perceives themselves as somewhat monstrous. Just an idea. Instead, he says this, completely unprompted, completely at random, just to spit it out for the audience. Oh, I'm sorry, for Roach.
Who are you talking to?
Just look at Henry, forcing himself not to smash the fourth wall into pieces. Your sacrifice will be acknowledged. In the books, Geralt tells this story to a girl he has just slept with, a girl who has a massive crush on him and he worries maybe falling in love with him. So, to deter her from doing something silly and abandoning her secure position in the Temple of Melitele, he tries talking to her about the first time he killed a person, partly to get it off his chest and partly to demonstrate to her that he is not a person she wants to spend her days with. All of that depth is washed right down the drain, as is customary for this abomination. It just happens because it's a scene from the books the fans like. Renfri then shows up, again, having stalked Geralt into the woods, again, and Geralt letting her, just for some bizarre reason.
You gave me an ultimatum, and I find they worked.
No, he didn't. He didn't give two shits about what you'd do. All he said was that you'd be proving everyone right by slaughtering people, which, need I remind you, you don't care about, you axe-crazy psychopath. Then they proceed to bump uglies, which leads me to believe that the only reason Renfri stalked Geralt into the woods at night instead of, preparing for the next day's fight, is because she was sexually frustrated. Which is pathetic compared to the canon Renfri, who came to do business with the Witcher and only slept with him to convince him she was choosing not to confront him, and because Sapkowski believes that Geralt is simply irresistible to anything with female sexual organs within 5 paces of him. Seriously, even vampires try to have their way with him at one point. In the next scene, we return to Sintra, where Ermion's mana finally runs out, and Nilfgaard storms the inner wall of the city. Calanthe realizes all is lost, and Ermion convinces her to send for Geralt to protect Ciri. Yes, Geralt is now in Sintra, don't question it. That is something we'll save for the 7th episode, the worst episode of this terrible season, and that includes episode 2.
Did your motherfucker, Snowman?
Fuck off! Anyway, Calanthe orders her men to prepare to die, and then summons Ciri for a final chat. She talks needlessly long about Nilfgaard's brutality. I mean, Calanthe, you are dying, you might want to speed things along a little bit, and only then tells Ciri to flee, and that
The world depends on it.
I'm sorry, what? What do you know about the world's stakes, you stool? Do you know that what the Elder Blood is in this botched timeline? If so, shouldn't you share that with Ciri? It ends up nearly killing her a bunch of times. You might consider that important information for her to know. Anyway, then Ciri demonstrates her power for the first time, and it's unintentionally funny, but we'll get to that later, because first we get this gem of a line.
This is why they came.
The stupid of this single sentence made me cringe to my heart. Jesus Christ, have we read the same books? Why would Nilfgaard, an empire with a vast array of spies and special agents, something even you demonstrated this botched season, send an army to retrieve one girl? Wouldn't that massively increase the chances of your special MacGuffin person getting lost or killed during the slaughter? do want to lose track of her location for years to come. Emir in the books was smart enough not to want an invasion of Sintra, and when he was pressured into it by his supporters, he sent a hand-picked squad of trusted subordinates, led by Cahir, to retrieve Ciri in secret during the siege, because you can't assign an army to retrieve one person. It just doesn't work. But perhaps I'm being too harsh on old Calanthe. I mean, it's just her opinion after all, and she is losing a lot of blood at this point. Not that the show ever contradicts that claim, and in fact actively supports it later, but hey, details.
My grandmother said I had to leave. Why? Why is Nilfgaard here? Why does the world depend on it?
Good question, Ciri. I see you and Henry both enjoy casually breaking the fourth wall. Anyway, we cut through a bunch of carnage and suicide, which left surprisingly little impact on me, considering this is supposed to be the violation of Sintra, the event so horrible it united these squabbling northern realms against their common foe, but maybe that's just me. I will say, even the sack of King's Landing had more of an effect on me than this. Ermion leaves so he can be captured and his character assassinated in a later episode, while Ciri and her escort, one knight, despite the fact that even in the books she was given a retinue, and here Calanthe seems to consider her even more important, begin galloping away through some remarkably empty and peaceful streets considering, the city is on fire around them. That is, of course, until Nilfgaard's very own version of Simo Häyhä arrives and snipes the knight in one shot, Cahir once again demonstrating an aim a dryad might envy, shooting the knight straight through the throat without hurting Ciri. He proceeds to capture the princess and completely butcher their first encounter, as it makes him into nothing but a ruthless lackey of the Nilfgaardian army. But that's only a taste of the character assassination Cahir is about to face. The scene chronologically resumes only after the butchery of Blaviken, but I'll cover it now because it makes more sense that way, and honestly should have been edited in that order as well. Cahir is riding away with Ciri. Wait, hold, pause. Why? Why is Cahir riding away with Ciri? Why is he alone? Did you remove context from the scene? Guys, I think they removed context from the scene. I mean, what reason does Cahir have not to bring Ciri back to Nilfgaard's command station? Especially since
This is why they came.
in this version of events. But then this happens. The first time I watched this scene, I remember bursting into incoherent manic laughter, then having to pause and laugh myself straight again. So let me get this straight. You chose Ciri's incredible, world-changing, earth-shattering power by having her real hard at the camera. Am I getting this right? It would appear so. Was this a good decision? Is this imposing? Is this frightening? Or is it wonderful, like Ciri's powers are meant to be? I rest my case. Then we proceed swiftly towards savaging Cahir's character as he claws his way desperately after Ciri, yelling at her to come back like a B-tier villainous minion, before being easily repelled and intimidated by Ciri's screeching, and having the plot literally split the ground open between them to prevent him from acting further, leaving him gawking in awe like an impotent monkey. I mean, god damn. Cahir's weakness was an actual plot point in the books, but you managed to make him downright pathetic way before that even could have had an impact on the audience. With this scene blissfully over, however, let's compare, shall we? In the books, Cahir's face and even humanity is not shown. The way Ciri remembers him, he is more like a demon than a man, clad head to toe in black plate, while never speaking a word to her, or at least none she could understand. You remember how Nilfgaard had its own language in both books and games? Good times. She remembers him swooping down on her in the middle of a burning street, then carrying her off to the woods to do something with her. What exactly she can't remember, and she's not sure she wants to. She's haunted by him in her nightmares for years, and when they come face to face once again, she panics and flees on instinct, terrified. To her, in the books, Cahir is less a man and more of a boogeyman. In truth, however, Cahir is actually a fairly chivalrous guy, and a lot of Ciri's fear stems from the situation she was in and Cahir's conduct with her. Cahir managed to miraculously chase Ciri down right as her escort was slaughtered and smashed in the burning streets of Sintra, rescuing the girl from a fiery death in the wreckage of a crumbling building. He proceeded to slaughter his way through both Sintran and Nilfgaardian forces fighting in the streets, losing all his subordinates in the process and barely making it out himself, all because his mission was meant to be kept secret from even the Nilfgaardian High Command. He then proceeded to get Ciri as far away from the fighting as he could, falling in with a group of refugees, before slipping into a nearby forest and, after finally passing out from exhaustion, Ciri was given her chance to escape. He didn't do anything to her, and is in fact the reason she survived Sintra at all, something that, much later, serves as a key plot point and in fact helps save Cahir's life. But hey, screw good characters, am I right? It's clearly not what the fans want. I am so looking forward to how they are planning on building up Cahir's character in the future, especially since this isn't even the worst thing he does.
A simple test of silver would have sufficed.
I had steel at the ready. Fuck.
Finally, we return to Geralt, snoozing in the woods while dreaming, remembering, hallucinating? I don't know, imagining Renfri's prophecy. To make Renfri more tied to the main plot, they also decide to awkwardly shove in a reference to Ciri, which fits about as well as a square would in a circle. Geralt awakes and, for some reason, merely not finding Renfri by his side in the morning immediately convinces him that Renfri lied to him and is about to slaughter the market. Wait, what? Why? Did you remove context from the scene? Guys, I think they removed context from the scene! For some reason, Renfri also knew Geralt would come to the market and didn't slit his throat while he was asleep, instead sending her men to meet him at the market. The bandits give Geralt an ultimatum, then immediately go for the attack before he can respond to their ultimatum. Brilliant. What follows is a fight scene channels more dedicated towards swordsmanship have already dissected clean. Shadiversity even took the time to go through the scene frame by frame, bless his heart. Links are in the description. All I'll say is I had a good laugh. The Fogs are brain dead compared to even their book counterparts and take their sweet time attacking one by one, so there is no skill implied on or displayed on Geralt's behalf, and although the scene is at least well choreographed from a performance standard, there is nothing about it that stands out, except for the hilarious look of surprise in the last bandit's eyes as Geralt cuts his head off. What stands out a lot more is the insanity of the second fight, where even the few merits Geralt's fight against the bandits had are thrown screaming out of the window. Whitewashed Renfri arrives on scene and looks like she's about to cry, in stark contrast to her book counterpart, who immediately entered into a state of almost dissonant serenity and cold cruelty at seeing her Hansa slaughtered.
Wunderbar!
You chose.
Not really, your guys went for the throat before he could.
I will kill her.
Please do, she won't mind.
Population control.
See?
I will kill everyone here until Stregobor comes down.
About that later. Wait, what about killing her? Why'd you throw her away? That has got to be the least practical way to hold a sword I have ever seen in my life. It's like you're offering your entire left side to the enemy on a silver platter. Renfri, I know you and Geralt fucked last night, but this is not the time to be kinky anymore. What follows is a scene full of twirls, flips, and scenes where both combatants are exposed more times than I can count, while neither of them deems to strike a blow while the other is moving, even though Renfri at least clearly goes for the kill on several occasions. Finally, Geralt has Renfri at his mercy before Renfri does the smart thing and lashes out at Geralt while he's still looking at her, forcing him to kill her. I choose to interpret this scene as Renfri having a death wish, basically, because otherwise it simply makes her brain dead, or rather more brain dead than she already has proven herself. Stregobor then arrives to try and collect the body, and Geralt threatens to kill him if he does. And I have to say, Stregobor remains remarkably more composed and dignified in the series than he does in the books, where he immediately and wisely shuts up the moment Geralt threatens him in the books. Here he continues to taunt him, almost gloating in his face, and for some reason Geralt stands there and takes it. Then the villagers begin to harass Geralt for initiating bloodshed in their streets, and we learn that he
Endanger the girl!
No, he didn't, you bint. He saved her. Christ, this show has the peasants even dumber than the books, and Sapkowski was not exactly kind in his depiction of the lower classes either. More importantly, though, I presume at least someone might have seen Renfri take Marilka hostage, which, kind of throws a dampener on the whole unprovoked attack narrative which canonically takes root. Not to mention, the bandits make their threat amidst a crowd of people before an inn early in the morning. But anyway, Marilka, the girl Geralt has known for less than a day, tells Geralt to leave Blaviken, and he sees this as deeply wounding, walking away in shame. Good stuff, so what's the damage this time? In the books, Renfri only enters a state of trance briefly while talking to Geralt, and honestly it's about as random and insignificant as in the show, but she only mentions prophetic visions of her own death and of tomorrow's morning. However, she also mentions during her talk with Geralt the Tridem Ultimatum, a term Geralt initially doesn't recognize. Eventually, Renfri decides to leave town and the two sleep together, and the next morning, Geralt is having breakfast with the alderman, who mentions the Tridem Massacre, where a group of bandits, in order to force the local baron to release their comrades, took a couple dozen people hostage on boats and began killing them to force the baron to comply. 10 people died before the baron gave in to their demands, and Geralt realizes what Renfri meant. He rushes off to the market, which he knows is the best place to begin a massacre should Renfri try and give Stregobor a similar ultimatum. The fight is similarly brief, although the bandits in canon are significantly more intelligent about trying to kill Geralt before Renfri arrives and coldly states that Geralt made his choice. Geralt maintains that he will not allow another tridem to take place, to which Renfri mentions that there wouldn't have been one, because she already spoke with Stregobor this morning, and he stated that she could burn the whole region for all he cared. He wouldn't allow in his tower anymore. Thus, starting anything now would have been pointless. Geralt then tries to get Renfri to leave, but slaughtering her crew is not something Renfri can let stand. The fight that goes on between the two is a lot sadder and more memorable than in the show. For one, Renfri fights with her signature checkered skirt as a cloak, which makes for a fighting style slightly less ridiculous and much more memorable than what is portrayed. And for another, no words are spoken between the two, and Renfri certainly doesn't try to convince Geralt to join her, only to stab him seconds later. I mean, that's kind of a bad way to negotiate. Finally, Geralt slices through her thigh, cutting an artery, causing her to begin bleeding out. It's a mortal wound and they both know it. Collapsing, Renfri asks Geralt to comfort her, saying that she's getting cold, and asks Geralt to hug her. Geralt, wisely, refuses to approach. Only when she dies does her hidden dagger fall out of her sleeve, betraying her true intentions. Renfri died a cold, murderous, hateful viper, just as she lived, and it makes her so much more of a strong and memorable character than the crybaby show version, someone you genuinely buy is too broken and spiteful to reform, even when you really would like them to. And in the aftermath, it is not some bratty, annoying little animal killer who sends Geralt on his way. It is the alderman, Caldemain, a man who respected and probably liked Geralt, and whom he had known for years, and he does so after having justifiably warned Geralt that he can't allow the Witcher to initiate bloodshed in his town, even if his suspicions are correct. In the eyes of the townsfolk, most of whom arrived at the scene only after the fight was done, it really did appear like Geralt simply lashed out at a bunch of people who insulted him last evening, nor did Stregobor dare taunt Geralt in front of anyone, and certainly not to his face. Geralt walks away, having lost a good friend, a good reputation, and a woman for whom he may have genuinely felt sympathy. Well, that took longer than I expected, but I'm glad I wasn't wrong in my initial assessment. Rewatching the show convinced me that it is, in fact, even worse than I remember, and we have plenty to look forward to, especially in episode 2.
Come here.
Yeah.
See you guys next time!